So I'm Mark Drainville from GHD. This is Sarah Greenberg from GHD also. We're here primarily to present on Article 1. That's the special town meeting on Monday. So proceed ahead here. So most of the wastewater treatment facility in town is 20 years or older. So it is quite old. The life expectancy of equipment and processes in a facility like this is 20 years. And so there is work that needs to be done at this facility over multiple phases, and this is one that I'm going to talk about today. Two of the needs are relatively urgent. The first one is what's called the Headworks facility. Has failed equipment and support systems. It's the first process in the treatment facility. It kind of receives a lot of abuse. So anything that anybody throws down the drain, this is the first thing that has to encounter that. So it's currently at its life expectancy of 20 years, and it's not uncommon for this to be among the first ones to kind of need attention because, like I said, it gets a lot of abuse at the facility. Not from the people who work there, but from what comes into the facility. Clarifiers have failed equipment. These are critical to meeting the permit. Most of the equipment in this process is actually 40 years old, so well beyond its useful life, or double the life expectancy. So I'm just going to show some photographs here. This is what's called the Headworks. There's we're approaching 20 years old. It's got corroded equipment. Equipment is no longer functioning the way it's supposed to, and well beyond its useful life. So what happens when this equipment doesn't function properly? Well, this equipment is used to take out essentially rags and what's called grit or sand. And if that equipment's not functioning, what happens is all of this stuff gets dumped throughout the rest of the facility, and it requires, as you can see here, manual cleaning of the facility. This is an annual process that's now occurring at the plant, where they have to go down and manually kind of scoop out the sand that's no longer being taken out at the first part of the plant. And then you can see rags that are getting caught up throughout the plant and clogging systems throughout the plant. So the secondary clarifiers, this is a process that is currently in very poor condition. These, in addition to being old, they don't meet current design standards. And you see in the next image here, these processes are not functioning properly. You can see the nice clear water in a properly functioning clarifier. The ones here are not properly functioning. So this facility's been reviewed various times over the years. Back in 2015, there was a capital improvement plan that was done for the facility, and that's 8 years ago. And at the time, it was noted that 2 of the 3 clarifiers at the time were well beyond their useful life and were in need of attention. A few years ago, another evaluation at the facility did indicate that the Headworks and clarifier upgrades were 2 critical upgrades that were needed at the facility.
Was any work done in 2015 or as a result of that?
Not in the area that I'm talking about. No, it was noted that it was in need of attention.
But the work was not done.
No. So within about 2 years, all of this equipment is going to be at or be well beyond its life expectancy. And this particular project, if it proceeds, is going to take 4 years to complete. So these current planned upgrades, they include replacement of failed equipment that has exceeded its life expectancy, design of new facilities that consider the future needs of the town. So this isn't just a replacement of equipment, it's also considering the future needs of the town going forward. Existing buildings and tanks are being used as much as possible. For example, what's called the Headworks building is being rehabilitated, so we're using that building in its entirety. We're just kind of giving it a facelift, if you will. The anticipated costs are up to $36 million for this work. One of the questions that we've been asked is, is there additional work that's required at the facility? Yes, there is. There is, as I mentioned early on, much of the equipment at this facility is 20-plus years old, and there is more work that will be needed at this. So I don't want everybody to think that this is all that's needed. Sewer department is currently completing a comprehensive wastewater management plan that's due at the end of this year. That plan is going to outline a number of things. It's going to outline necessary upgrades due to exceeding life expectancy, future growth of the town, as well as some environmental needs. So the needs of the town going forward involve all three of these items. And the work that's planned here is part of this plan. It's being accelerated a bit ahead of the plan, but it's considering all of these items that are part of this comprehensive plan. Yes, Peter?
Some of the people are going to ask, is it worth doing these steps where the rest of the plant is in so much bad shape? Is this the first two steps we'd do anyways?
Yes, I would say that these are the two most urgent items at the facility.
We'd
So-
have to do this, even if we upgraded the entire plant, these would be the first two steps.
Yes,
I agree.
yes. So why do this now? So we are pursuing we've pursued state funding for this project. There is, at this time, more money available through the state revolving fund loan than there has been in past years. However, there are many more towns seeking funding. So the town applied for and was listed as on the state priority list for funding. This was last August. The basis for this request was the 2021 evaluation, and I showed a couple slides earlier. So when you submit a request for funding, you have to have a basis for it, and the report that was done 2 years ago was submitted as the basis for this. Only 60 out of 89 projects that were submitted to the state program received funding. I know I don't expect everybody to be able to read this, but you could probably all see the red line right here. This is the red line the state draws. If you're above it, you get funded. If you're below it, you don't get any funding. And this project was third from the bottom, so it just barely made the cut this year. The local DEP office pushed funding for this project because they recognize the importance of it. This is a highly competitive process. It's a priority list, and you have to justify the project, and this project received funding based on the justification. Each year, the state could change the priority. What's important can change year to year, and they're already telling towns that next year there are going to be slightly different priorities. So,
And Mark, might I,
yes,
even though we got it this year, or we didn't get it this year, it's a whole new set of competition the following year. It just doesn't roll over and you move up.
that's correct. In fact, we were assisting a town who was actually right above the red line, and the state warned them if they don't do everything to stay on this list, they may not get funded next year. So there's no guarantee for next year. So how will this be paid? By getting state funding, the town gets 10% principal forgiveness. That is a slightly fancy term for grant funding. So 10% of the project will get a kind of a grant. You're also eligible for 0 to 2% interest, which is well below the market value for interest rates. And there's a potential for more funding through the federal infrastructure bill that passed last year. They haven't announced exactly what that might be, but that potential is there too. So the specifics on how it will be paid is the up to $36 million will be reduced by 10%. For the principal forgiveness will be reduced further by 17%, which will be paid by Bourne. it would be funded through the sewer budget. And so the balance of the 27 million will cost in the range of $80 to $100 per year per user, is what the town's calculation is. So when you're listed for state funding, you have to meet a very strict schedule. If you miss any deadline along the way, you drop off the list, and one of the other 39 communities that didn't make the list will be allowed to seek the funding. So the first deadline was to submit for funding last August. The town needed to approve design funds for this project last fall, which it did. The next deadline was to approve what's called a borrowing authorization. It's the town seeking authorization to borrow money through the SRF program for the project. That deadline was actually June of 2023. We sought an extension, and the state is giving an extension through the end of July to see if the town will comply with this deadline for approving the borrowing authorization. And then there's a few other deadlines coming. Ultimately, the expectation is the project will be completed by 2027. So the next step in this is the town does approve the borrowing authorization on Monday. Then we'd stay within the SRF program and continue with the funding. So that's an overview, but yes, any questions?
Did Bourne have to go to town meeting and approve the borrow?
Oh,
No, so the 17% they're gonna contribute, they have to do.
we interact with Bourne through a contract versus interaction like a regional
Okay, so,
entity.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
So, just to make sure I understand this and get it perspective, what we voted on at October town meeting was to start the process, basically, and to do the engineering, which this is what you've done, is that correct?
It's still in process.
Okay, but that's part of what we did back in October, and this is really just a continuation of what we started then. It's not a brand new project, it's
Nope.
not anything different than that, okay?
Correct. Yep. Yes.
So is the town meeting Monday to just approve the money?
Yeah, I mean, the specific request is going to be what's called a borrowing authorization to allow the town to borrow funds through the state revolving fund loan. So that's what the specific request is for.
On that last slide, the very last thing, it said something about 2027. What was that about?
So,
We wouldn't have to pay extra in our sewer bill till we start beginning to pay the,
yeah, let me just explain what happens with this is that, so June of 2024 is when the construction of the project would be anticipated to begin. While the project is under construction, the state funds the interest at no cost. So the state actually funds it for 3 to 5 years. Our expectation is this could be a 3-year project. The town would not have to enter into close on a loan like you'd close on a loan with a house. They don't close on the loan until around 2027.
so
That's when the town payments would
our
begin.
bill wouldn't go up $80 to $100 until 2027.
So is that correct? I guess I'm gonna turn to the sewer commission.
Yes, it would
to
hit
answer
that. That's what we plan in terms of our debt service, yes.
Because it just went up 15% in our last bill. It was like $48.50, and now we're gonna have to pay another $80 to $100 a year. That's so much. For one.
Indeed, that's one reason why we haven't gone forward with doing the whole project or the whole facility.
In the paper, it's like, it's gonna start as soon as this gets approved. If
No,
it gets
no.
approved, 2027.
Any project we go forward with in borrowing money, it usually has a life expectancy before it hits our actual tax dollars.
Okay, so that wouldn't be till.
And it's usually not until the project's completed, because that's when we either get our grant monies paid off, et cetera.
So
Because the
it's-
36 million is, we hope, not what it's actually gonna cost, but that's about the maximum, because there's contingencies we factor in to make sure that we have borrowed enough money.
Well, I'm just concerned about the increase again, so it wouldn't be until 2027.
Correct.
Okay.
How about if you get the project done before 2027? If you get it done a year ahead of time, then you'd start getting bills ahead of time.
Depends on how the
So I,
bond.
yeah, so I could speak to that, that's very unlikely. And I'll tell you why.
No, I
Yeah,
understand it's
yeah,
unlikely.
but you are correct, that if it gets done sooner, then the town would have to repay it sooner, but I could tell you that this is based on it's a very realistic schedule. Nowadays since the pandemic, supply of equipment, is still, impacted greatly, so I don't see this being, any better than 2027, so, realistically, so.
Realistically, yes.
Yeah, okay, yes.
Another question. I've been hearing rumblings about, we should somehow have already the master plan for everything going forward. And I wonder if you could explain, you mentioned that there's a plan due at the end of the year. If you could sort of explain where we are in that process and what you sort of anticipate coming up.
Yeah, so the plan itself was initiated in the fall of last year. These plans take at least a year. Anybody who does these comprehensive plans doesn't go and sit in an office and just do it. There's a public component to it. As we're going through this wastewater planning process, we are having meetings with the town. There are various town boards that contribute as we work our way through it. So right now, we're looking at the end of this year to have a draft plan. It's not gonna be 100% done then, but it'll be a draft plan for kind of public contribution, public review.
And what do you anticipate that plan to show?
So.
Not
yep.
necessarily the specifics, but sort of
Yeah.
what are you looking for?
Yeah, so what the plan looks at is a couple different things. So there are nutrient contamination issues that the town needs to address. This is something that's impacting all of southeastern Massachusetts. It's a result of septic systems, excessive amounts of septic systems in concentrated areas. And there are nitrogen limits that have been set on one of your watersheds in town, or it's a draft that's been issued, and so we are looking to address the excessive nitrogen. That's number one. The second thing is we're looking at the growth in the town over a 20-year period. We've been talking to the planning department and looking at what kind of growth needs to be accommodated by your wastewater treatment facility over a 20-year period. And I guess the third part of it is we're looking at existing infrastructure. So looking at the condition of existing infrastructure and its ability to continue on for, I guess, another 20 years. So those are the three kind of primary pieces that we're looking at. And
So in terms of eventually implementing whatever comes out of that, what would be the, sort of the timeframe of that?
so it's likely that the implementation would probably be a phased approach of addressing these needs. So it could include, for example, additional work at the wastewater treatment facility. It could include sewering of areas that have excessive septic systems that are contributing to the nitrogen issues in town. What it would not include would be sewering for like commercial growth purposes, because that's not something that we can predict, okay? We have to try and accommodate it to some extent in the wastewater treatment facility, but we're not gonna lay out sewering for growth purposes, but we need to just accommodate it. So primarily this will be upgrades of treatment facilities, being able to accommodate growth in town, which equates to wastewater flow. Yes?
What is the town looking at if, for some reason or other, it does not get approved in
So,
what happens?
so this facility is, I would say it's running in a very compromised condition right now. There have been overflows of wastewater at this facility because for different reasons, but, these are violations that the state has been accommodating so far, but if the facility doesn't start to take some kind of action, they'll lose patience, and you could get fined. The bad thing about getting fined is that you could lose funding, or you could lose access to funding, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. You could get fined, and then you won't have access to the state revolving fund loan if you get fined. So they look for communities that are being proactive to provide funding. So,
I actually have two questions. Does that, the Swiss Beach area have anything to do with this funding? And also, what happens to the enterprise fund, the sewer enterprise fund? Why isn't that used?
So can you help, so does this have anything, this article does not have to do with Swiss Beach. There is an article on Monday that does have to do with Swiss
Okay.
Beach.
But,
Okay.
excuse me if I might,
Yeah, go ahead.
funding for Swiss Beach has already been appropriated.
Okay.
Article 5, which is appearing on the Monday night's warrant, is a deletion of wording in the original article to make it more agreeable with what South Swift Beach wanted.
Okay.
So that money's been appropriated, already authorized. And these monies, the question was what would happen if we don't do it? Everything is operating now, as Mark has indicated, on a compromised position. The facility, which in earlier, Mark, I was just changing it to the mechanicals. Facilities would be a building, as interpreted, and mechanicals is what your life expectancy.
Right.
Everything in there was changed in about 2005 when they did an upgrade. So it's all 20-plus years old now, everything is. And so it's all reaching a problem, and it's, we're hoping nothing catastrophic happens because everything is compromised. It's, we have 4 lagoons down there. We store in 1 and 2 some pre-treated effluent, and in 3 and 4, I believe it is, we store some that's coming off, and we haven't had time to process yet.
But does the sewer department, don't they have any funds from put aside at all? So they don't have to borrow all this money? Like the
That would be,
enterprise fund?
that would be on the enterprise side with the sewer commissioners. We do, our responsibility is projecting what the plant needs, the facility itself and their operating costs. He does have a line in there for unexpected situations, and it's upwards of close to $1 million. And it covers the problems that we may incur during the course of the process in trying to just do the 1.5 million gallons per day that we're qualified to do.
I would also say that it's highly unusual to fund projects like this through a budget, strictly through the budget. I mean, this state revolving fund loan is used by all the communities in the state for projects like this, so.
So this problem hasn't snuck up on us. This problem has been growing for years, and it's not a surprise. What I want to know is, okay, we authorized this $36 million. What's going to change in the way we manage the operation to keep it from just going to shit?
Well,
Literally.
yeah, if I.
No, I want from the town to
Sorry.
get an answer.
Okay.
We can only do what we're allowed to do. Every time we do something, let's say, replace a piece of equipment, we go to town meeting for approval. That's the ultimate for spending and borrowing.
But I'm
authorization.
talking about operational management that has allowed the situation to get to this point. How are we going to not be sitting here, well, hopefully not 20 years from now, but I hope to be sitting here 20 years from now.
Well, as I
So
indicated.
how are we gonna keep this from happening again?
Well, as I indicated to capital planning yesterday, we're trying to arrange things so that we're doing these improvements now, and we have a certain level of borrowing that we're paying through the rate structure. When our borrowing goes down, we'll put in another project and replace that one with the borrowing. So we're borrowing, trying to level off our borrowing, so we're constantly improving part of the system. So it's not all at one time.
Okay,
But the other problem is, the issue is, it's run out, it's time. It's 20 years old, and that's the expected life limit. on these components.
Yes,
So,
Yeah, but an operational plan would have predicted this, and you would have had continual replacement, so you wouldn't get to an emergency situation.
I
And
agree.
engineering management would not have gotten us to this point.
right, it should have been done in 2015.
And that's my question, so how do we ensure that it doesn't, what's 10 years from now, 2020, 2035, that we're not sitting here again with the same problem?
It's very difficult because and I'm not suggesting anything untoward when I say it's a political environment. Within the political environment, there's a lot of grants available, loans available, et cetera. And it depends on what the leaders determine it needs to be done. So it's dependent very much on the available monies too. Because, okay, we can fund 36 million, but not off the ratepayers.
Well, you are
Exclusively.
funding this off the rate base.
Not all, it's not exclusively.
Not all of it, you're right.
Yes, and when monies comes available, like in the national government, with the federal government, with the infrastructure, it's a matter of trying to get access to those monies, and it's very difficult to do that, and going through all the hoops that they require. But we try to do it as best we can, as quickly as we can,
I understand that we're trying to get money to fix the problem, but
yeah.
Is there a plan in place for replacements as we go along, so that we don't come to a position like this again?
There's a couple plans. GHD, as our consultant, has put together a major plan overlooking the entire project, and then within that plan, there's different subsections that addresses various issues.
So you're
But
gonna
there
be
is-
addressing things and replacing things as we go along and moving forward, so that we don't end up in this position again? That's the plan.
Hopefully we are, yes.
Hopefully.
But I might add, the people you see in this room can be volunteers. I'll be making those decisions. The gentleman sitting to your left has been making that decision. We're all volunteers.
I
We're
understand,
volunteers
and I
too.
appreciate that
Yeah.
you spend your
We
time.
do
so.
appreciate what you do.
We're-
because
I'm-
we're
Oh,
volunteers
I'm not
also.
I'm questioning, I just want you to know, it's,
I just wanna make sure that there's a plan in place
yes, there
as
is.
we move forward.
And I do want to stress too that you got every bit of life out of this equipment, you know? So this 20 years old, some of this equipment is 40, approaching 40 years old.
Right,
It's
that's,
even-
and I'm thinking, well,
yeah.
why wasn't there a plan, or why haven't we been doing things over the years so that we didn't reach
Mhm.
40 years old on some of the pieces and 20 years old on other pieces?
Yep.
Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand. I will say that, I understand your question. I will point out there is currently more funding available than there has been in the past. That could have been something that entered into the issue, yeah, so.
And how the votes go in town and stuff like that, and get these things across to the people who are voting on it, I think.
So the state is giving 10%, is that?
It's a,
You
yeah.
just walked into.
yes,
So
it's
that's
a
what we're,
10, yes.
we'd
That's
like to
correct.
move forward.
10%, you get 10%, it's 10% reduced. It's a grant. They call it principal forgiveness, but it's like a grant. It's like getting a grant. So.
And a low interest loan.
And you get a low interest loan. It's going to be no lower than 2%, no higher than 2%. There's a potential of it being lower, but it's no higher than 2%, which nowadays is a decent number. So yes.
Is that federal infrastructure, is that opera funds?
No, the federal infrastructure bill, it was something that passed, I want to say, in January of last year. And it had, they called it a bipartisan infrastructure bill. I apologize, I don't know it's federal, and it injected money into all 50 states. And it helps to fund not only water projects, but transportation and broadband and the like, so.
So did the state just change the name, they get it from the federal government and it becomes FR5?
So the SRF, State Revolving Fund, that is a program that's existed for many years. It exists in all states, and it is funded through the federal government. They provide the basis for the loans. Federal infrastructure bill is providing more money into these programs in all states. And it lasts for, it was a 5-year program. there's 4 more years left of it, so. Yes.
I don't know who would answer this, but the money we pay, does that go into a fund that has a name in Wareham? Oh, in Wareham. Oh, same thing. Like, it's a general fund.
I mean, your sewer
Well,
fees,
Everything the homeowners pay, you know, where does that go into a
your
fund?
real estate taxes goes into the general fund. And the separate fees you pay for the sewer department goes into an enterprise fund that is kept separate for the support of the sewer system.
And that year after year runs, if that.
That goes into a separate fund. It never closes out into the general fund. Even if let's say, you collect more than it costs to run, that money is set aside in the enterprise fund for a sewer project. We did, there was $2 million each, it was a total of $6 million, and we were going to borrow it, and then we decided we had the money as, what we call retained earnings, that the ratepayers had paid into that, so instead we used that money, so we didn't have to borrow anything to complete that
Yeah.
project.
That's exactly what I meant.
Yes.
Okay, so
But
there's.
it's not enough to fund something like this, no.
No, there's sewer fees, so there's the fee you pay, so, and you're gonna pay $742 per EDU, I believe, is the new charges.
Wow.
And so if we did get more of that federal infrastructure money, that would bring the 27 million down further, is that right?
It would,
Yeah.
I
Oh,
just
that's
can't
good.
promise,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
hesitant to promise.
Well,
it.
we will request it, is that the idea? We will
So the-
apply for it if it's available.
Yeah, so it would so how, the SRF program, which is a state agency, they make that information known once the town will be submitting an application. If this passes on Monday, in October, we submit essentially a loan application to the state, and shortly thereafter, they would let the town know what the funding package is, so. But the 10%, that's a definite. So. Anything else? You don't have to stay for the full 2 hours. It's like- Okay,
Thank you.
okay.
We'll go through it again if you want, no, I'm kidding.
If those of you who came late, I mean, you're welcome to stay. We can go through the presentation again, and, so.
Just using that, Mark, those 3 circles up there,
Yeah.
those are the clarifiers.
Yeah, just, these are the clarifiers, and this building is what's called the Headworks.
And where does the spills come from? Which of those? That
So-
containment facility down there?
Yeah, so just, what happens is all the wastewater in town is pumped up to this facility. And this main plant was not designed to handle all of the flow that comes into this facility. Any amount that it can't handle goes into these storage lagoons. And these have nearly overflowed. And as a precautionary measure, there's been some spillage on the site, so.
And the new clarifiers would be deeper, and therefore things would be able to
So they,
avoid that problem, is that right?
yeah, the new clarifiers so this is an unusual setup to store raw wastewater in a lagoon. Most facilities handle the flow as it comes in. And this would be a step in that direction, okay, to be able to no longer rely on these. It would also have a properly designed tank. These no longer meet current standards, and it would be new equipment too, so.
And upgrade would not eliminate those overflow things, it just gives us more capacity to handle.
So we would not get rid of these, that's correct. I mean, we're not, in fact, any facilities, we're looking for other uses for them.
Okay.
In fact, at the town meeting last October, we had suggested one of the options was to put a brand-new building in here for the Headworks, and going through the evaluation, we've decided as a group that we're gonna rehabilitate this building, so,
Presumably saving some money.
yes.
I hope you understand the Headworks building, that effectively removes all the things that you're not supposed to be putting in the sewer system.
Yeah, that's well put.
What happens when those pools are full, like to stop them from overflowing? Do you have to send that?
So, could you go back, Sarah, to the beginning? So what happens is, if you don't want these to overflow, they would be forced to send more flow through the main plant, and it's not designed for that, so you would not get full treatment. So the plant has a, I should tell you this. So after the flow passes through the facility, it's discharged into the Agawam River. And in order to discharge to that river, the town has to meet what's called a discharge permit. So there are a series of parameters that the wastewater has to be below in order to be able to continue to discharge to the river. So if you send too much through here, you may not be able to meet your permit.
Is capacity affected seasonally, like in the summer when there are more people in town? Are we at greater risk?
It's slightly higher in the summer, but
It's often what we use the lagoons for, to
Yes,
balance it
yeah,
off.
Yeah.
Because if you have someone, like in the morning, everybody's getting ready for work, or they're getting ready to go to the beach or whatever, so they're using the system, and it's greater than we can process immediately, so we keep it for when there's a downtime
Uh-huh.
and flow it through.
So this
So it's a
cycle's-
balance.
Gotcha.
So it's often referred to as equalization.
you know, what also affects it is rain events, and actually tide events. There's, you know, weather can affect how much water comes into this facility too. So that's why it depends on the time of year. It's not always the summer, so.
In fact, the lagoons are very full right now, primarily because of the extensive rain we've been experiencing.
Yeah.
I had a question. Mr. Pigeon mentioned things that we shouldn't be putting in there. Is there a public education component that is missing? Or does that not have to do with what the public puts
I
in?
think it isn't a piece of this presentation primarily because it's something we constantly put out. There was a gentleman, I can't remember his name. Were you there at our last meeting?
Yeah.
That's it, okay. He has another list that he gave us, and we were discussing that list, and he suggested, and I think very constructively, that we ask WCTV if, let's say when they're announcing our meetings, that they also have a screen come up with the items. And I think it's like, over the years of having sewage systems, you would think everybody would know what they shouldn't be dumping, even though they probably still are. But you're right, they need to be reminded that, yeah.
Nobody reads that blue paper.
No, when you do your bacon and you're done, they put the grease down. Grandma used to put it in an old tobacco can. They don't do that anymore, they put it down the drain.
Well, so I will, one quick thing on this is, I think you've all seen in the grocery store flushable wipes. Has everybody seen that? No, I mean, they are flushable in the sense that you can flush them, but the wastewater treatment facility and the pumping stations do not want to see those. So that's part of the issue too.
Yeah, because they say those are biodegradable, which is fine, and they are biodegradable. But they don't spend that much time in the system to biodegrade, because if you, at the end of the system, far reach of the system, if you flush, what you flush will show up within a matter of hours down at the plant, in spite of going through 90 miles of sewer lines.
People will flush, well, not flush, but you have very odd things that end up in wastewater influent. Everything from flushable wipes to, believe it or not, motorcycles. So, in Washington DC, they got a motorcycle in there, so.
New York City, they got a bicycle, yeah.
Yeah, so.
They have larger pipes.
Yes, they do.
Yes,
Yes, they do.
don't have photos of any rubber duckies that have made it through from a kid being mad and dumping it, but
Somebody's turtle.
Right, right.
Ditches, wallets.
Yes, there are
Cell phones.
money, I've been to plants where they have a clothesline and they have money clothespinned up, letting it dry.
That would help fund it.
That would, yes, it would.
I'm surprised each plant doesn't have a gallery somewhere, things that go through.
Things they pick out.
Hmm.
So despite the public information that would be useful, you still need that facility. It's still required by the state to have that, because not everybody gets the message, so.
Right.
Yeah.
How much do you think you could, by public education in handing out granny cans to put your oil in, how much good would that do you think?
What it would do is it would cut down on maintenance activities at the facility and in the pumping stations, because some of these, like the flushable wipes that I mentioned, what they do is they clog pumps and they clog valves and components of the system. So that's primarily what it would help with, is reducing maintenance.
Which
So-
would save cost.
Which would save cost, that's correct.
Operating costs.
Yes, that's correct, yep. So,
Not to mention, we have to send 2 employees out to dismantle the pump, to clean out the impellers, and put it back together again.
Doesn't sound like a fun job.
well, that's not a fun job.
I think this has been very helpful. Just wish more people would have come. Well, it's recorded, so anyone who wants to can see it.
Do you have another question?
I did.
Yeah.
Why, I read that 3 out of 5 select people are wanting this to be on hold or not approved Monday.
I remember the question, I think Selectman Bessie was adamant about that. As a matter of fact, he was looking for more background information that would support the need to replace these issues. And we have, over the years, several reports giving us by other GHDs. For one, the condition of these devices to begin with, and of course, the superintendent or the director over there tells us, and you can go in and look at it and see the condition it's in.
Why was it published that 3 out of 5 are wanting it to be postponed or not approved at this time?
All I can suggest that he was asking for more background information, and I would, next time I'm with them, I'll invite them to come down to the facility and go through it themselves.
Are they gonna make that motion on Monday?
Is that what the report's gonna say? They're gonna recommend not?
Yeah.
I don't know, they're the only group that voted it down.
Finance recommend?
Yes, capital planning approved.
This presentation was modified to address questions that came up in the select board
Yeah,
meeting.
but they're not here.
They're not here.
No, but on Monday, this is an informational session for the public. We intend to present this on Monday at the town meeting.
So I have a
Everyone will
question.
have a chance.
You presented the schedule before of the different steps. So we got an extension already to the end of July. If we don't vote yes, what happens?
You would drop off the list.
Oh, okay, so,
Yeah,
We lose the eligibility
okay.
for any of the funds.
yeah. The state granted the extension through July. They would go to another community.
But the requirement for the,
So, no, I won't, well, I won't say, you're not gonna get fined for not doing this project. You run the risk of,
Being fined for what we're doing because we didn't do the project.
Not meeting
Not really, yeah.
Are the recent beach closures a result of these problems?
No,
no,
No.
no.
different bacteria.
Okay.
Being a keep beach town, we have a large variety of bacteria.
Mr. Pitson, you
Yes.
mentioned that this is, the board is staffed by all volunteers. Do you think that if there were a professional hired to be on that committee, that things would change or be different?
I don't believe they would. I think, we have some 38 committees in this town. They up to around 200 volunteers. We're all live here in Wareham. This is our community, our friends, our neighbors, and we're all trying, doing the best job we can and think they should be done. And I don't think professionals could do a better job. We do, or have been talking to the administration about bringing on an engineer. And it's, when you look at the difficulty in hiring the like, it's an idea that would be, that position could help advise us on a day-to-day basis in addition to doing large projects such as our consultant, GHD.
Can I ask a question in general, not anything to do with this?
Sure.
Okay, in February of 2021, it mentioned that they were gonna be working on a system to make sewer billing more equitable, like, you know. And, well, I haven't heard anything since. It says, it'd be based on water usage, billing based on equivalent dwelling unit schedule. Commission hopes to make that billing more equitable by tailoring bills to the size of the household.
The commissioners have discussed that.
February
From time to
19th,
time.
2021, it was in.
Yeah. We have a workshop coming up, and I'm hopefully going to invite our billing company to come in and tell us what the needs may be.
Couldn't you use the town census? You do it every year. You can tell how many people live in a house.
Well, it's actually,
That doesn't always reflect the usage, because I know
No.
I have a neighbor next to me,
It doesn't
who
look
nobody's
like
ever
this.
there, and it's just seasonal, and they water their lawn.
well, that's what we hope to,
You know, that uses a lot of water.
Well, that's water different than sewer.
Well, where does it go? I mean,
We have
No, but
different
that's how the
bills.
bills calculate.
That's how the bills are.
Based on their
water usage.
water usage.
I thought you couldn't have anything compatible with water and sewer. They keep saying, oh, I can't do that, we can't do that.
no, there's methodology like Bourne does on the usage and several others. In fact, we're one of the only 2 or 3 in the state that still use EDUs to
Yeah.
bill the sewerage. And we just want to look at, see if it's equitable for 1, it's doable for 2, and would it be reasonable to charge based on that in your perspective,
Both
based
those
on
are-
usage?
are enormous.
What is EDU?
Equivalent dwelling unit?
Equivalent. Jimmy, was it rolled off your head? What's the EDU stand for?
Equivalent dwelling unit.
Okay, thank you. That'll be on the quiz.
You would think you would have nightmares about
So you are looking into something like that?
We've been looking into
I mean,
that.
there's
We-
some, across the street is a family of 8, and I'm a family of 1, and I have to pay the same thing that they do for sewer.
It's something we're going to explore. There's an awful lot of issues on our table, and we just have to, get the most catastrophic first, this one in particular.
This was February 2021. I haven't heard anything since.
Indeed, I understand. It's an issue, though, we have a workshop coming up, and it is on our agenda. I believe it's gonna become a regular item.
This is very informative.
I might point out that this is not an attempt to expand the facility, to be able to process more. It was built to do 2 million gallons per day, and that is what it currently is rated at. To do it, if we were to increase the ability of the plant to process, it would be counterproductive because we could not deal the end by dumping our balance into the river. The river is very slow moving, so it doesn't replenish itself quickly, and it's surrounded by septic systems, so it in itself adds nitrogen to the river. And that's the primary limitation as to what we can produce. The next one is the fact that the plant is not built to handle any more than 2 million.
So are we at capacity now?
Yes,
Has the moratorium been lifted?
Negative,
So there still is a moratorium?
yes.
yes.
Oh, okay. There's still building permits going out.
If they don't, well, we're gonna talk to them, but if they don't have to attach, excuse me, that's talking for the planning board. I understand your point.
Okay.
Is sewage always dispersed into a river, or are there other ways that it gets treated in other locations?
So treated wastewater is typically discharged either to a river, or another option is groundwater. And one of the things that we're exploring as part of the comprehensive planning process is to explore opportunities in the town to discharge treated wastewater into the groundwater. So that would be an opportunity to expand the capacity of the facility, which we're doing as part of the planning process. Most of the communities on the Cape actually discharge to groundwater because there aren't any rivers or streams on the Cape, so. Yep. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you guys for really pushing this through.
Yeah.
Well done, you guys.